Well, there's a saying I've said a couple times, maybe more than a couple: do good, but don't do too good.
December to Dismember. Once again, this is more like the precursor to the pay-per-view, and just sort of just how it just fell apart, really. We're going to be just talking about some of the big stories in the first few months, of the WWE ECW experiment, would you say? I don't know. But the biggest one is the day that Rob Van Dam and Sabu got busted. And you told me beforehand, you remember this happening at the time. He was Rob suspended and stuff like that, but I'll just give you the sort of basics of it. The new WWE version of ECW was already annoying long-time fans. I mean, basically, I wrote this later on. It's just like, from the off, it seemed like one giant troll job to just upset long-time ECW fans. Anyway, we've been force-fed the Zombie on the first episode, non-ECW characters like Kevin Thorne and Mike Knox performing alongside, the Sandman, Balls Mahoney, just incredible, and of course Stevie Richards. But at least in the beginning, Rob Van Dam was the ECW champion with the original ECW, the last incarnation of the ECW heavyweight title. And then Rob Van Dam and Sabu had their Jim Duggan Iron Sheik moment. Do you want to explain it all, or shall I continue sort of laying the groundwork?
Well, you can please explain further from what you read on it. I'm going to give my kind of take from the locker room, but I want to preface it. Number one, based on the rise and fall of ECW, which was an incredibly successful, money-generating documentary DVD that led to the relaunch of ECW, but with the WWE spin on it. Wasn't originally supposed to be like that. I was really into a few separate conversations with certain players, talking about Dreamer, Shane McMahon, other people, that this was going to be completely different. So bear in mind what we're saying about it being a disappointment and it just was an experiment or whatever. It wasn't supposed to start off like that. It really was supposed to be a tried and true recreation of the original ECW brand. Now, obviously, we couldn't crucify people or light people on fire or do any of that stuff, at least not certain situations week to week on TV. But as with anything else, when it comes into too many cooks in the kitchen, too many visions, and you have the original guy with the vision that was successful having to battle with Vince McMahon and all these other people that had a different vision, that was the beginning of the end. One note that you put in the notes, Rob was also WWE champion from One Night Stand, so he was sort of an undisputed world champion at the time that this arrest happened.
Aside from the Raw version of the belt, was it the Raw version at the time of the belt? So there was a SmackDown champion, a Raw champion.
Yeah, it was Cena's belt. So this was the WWE title, and then there was the World Heavyweight title, correct? Or the undisputed one.
So there were still three, quote unquote, world titles, and WWE and Rob Van Dam had two of them. So not undisputed, but definitely the reigning.
Well, you have to, before we even get into that, you have to talk about the fact that the way I think WWE viewed Rob was very, I would say sometimes they were truly, high on him as far as, oh my God, that's a bad way of putting it. He was very hot and lukewarm. He was never cold to them where they buried him, but it was a very much stop, start, stop type thing. So this thing that happened in One Night Stand with him beating John Cena, who at the time, maybe not in 2025, but he was the dude. He was the mascot for WWE. Vince protected Cena as much as he could. And to have Rob go over really did let all of us look like, wow, they are going to take care of ECW. It is going to be a true representation. It is going to honor the legacy. And our biggest star now is put over for the WWE title over the mascot, John Cena. Dude, that's like, you know what I mean? I think they were just setting us up and getting our hopes up and just bringing us down.
Yeah, the performers and the fans alike, let me tell you. So the real issue is, I'm sure anyone who lived through this at the time will know the story. So, Rob Van Dam and Sabu were pulled over for speeding. They were found to have something like 18 grams of weed on them and various pills. I'm not sure if they're all prescription, and also some paraphernalia on Sabu as well. WWE. Here's the thing. WWE suspended Rob for 30 days. And I thought it was Sabu as well, but I was looking at his matches, and he'd never stopped wrestling on TV, so apparently it was just Rob.
I think
But
they ended up starting to bury Sabu at that point, right? Didn't he lose a bunch of matches? Outside of me, I know I wrestled him after that as well.
he lost all his matches towards the end of the year, but they were still fairly high on him. But they actually had Sabu wrestling Big Show for a couple of months, including at SummerSlam that year as well. So they weren't killing him off, but he was in the title picture for a while, and then after that, he was just another guy on the card. With that being said, Rob is suspended for 30 days. But just before he's suspended, it's almost like a Brock Lesnar thing in UFC 2016. Well, we know you're absolutely rolling, doing your blood is full of all the illegal substances, but we're still going to let you wrestle to suit our needs. And with Brock, it was Mark Hunt. With Rob Van Dam, they got him to lose the WWE title to Edge in a triple threat match that also featured John Cena on Raw. Then the next day, Rob loses the ECW title to the Big Show in no less than Philadelphia.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Let's
That's what
kill
I
that
mean.
town.
Now that's cold. You know what I mean? I said hot and lukewarm. They're at that point, they're doing what they can. It's one of those things. I've been a part of listening them talk about other talent, and they probably said the same thing about me. Like, let's give them what they want and let's show them how wrong they are for wanting it. The fans. They love Rob. They think Rob's great. We'll give it to them, and then this is a perfect opportunity for us to have him lose both of those titles, and then more importantly, look and say, see, he's not like Triple H and Shawn and all these people without really saying it. You're saying it. And if it was somebody else, I know there's been people that have failed drug tests who have been figured in, who have been the favorites politically. And what do? They still allowed him to wrestle. They go over and then they serve their 30 days and they never make mention why they're gone for 30 days. As a matter of fact, sometimes they would, if they haven't done it, they want to do the injury angle to take them out for a month to protect that talent. They clearly have the choice about how they address this.
Yeah, there was a lot of ones with Jeff Hardy or Randy Orton. I seem to remember back in the day where I think Randy especially should have been on his third strike and you were fired for several times. And then, I don't know if it was for drugs or anger management and stuff like that. I think the way they got around it with Randy is that, well, he was suspended once for an anger issue and not a drug issue, and therefore we're giving him another chance. And not because, he's a future world title contender that's figured in.
Yeah, and Randy draws, and Randy's a legend, and Randy deserves, to get the opportunities. But back then, we may not have seen Randy Orton if he was a different person and he wasn't figured in. And obviously, Triple H thought a lot of him. That's the difference between staying there, well over 20 years, multiple world titles, millions of dollars made, millions of dollars generated for WWE. But some other people that we've seen have never gotten the first chance, much less second, third, fourth, fifth.
I sort of, by accident, I think I mentioned Jeff Hardy, and I sort of lump Rob Van Dam with Jeff Hardy as someone who can be your world title holder and somebody who, like Jeff, just gets over on their own, regardless if there's a story or no story, or if they're figured in or not figured in. He can be plugged in anywhere. But for whatever reason, not so much with Rob, more Jeff, has been his own worst enemy, I guess, over the years. And this, with Rob, it just seems like one giant piece of bad luck and bad timing, really. But why do you think it is with Rob that he wasn't figured in as much as he could be? I mean, starting from 2001 in WWF, he could have been the champion. He was so popular. He could have won it off Kurt Angle or Steve Austin during the invasion.
Well, there's a saying I've said a couple times, maybe more than a couple: do good, but don't do too good. I feel like Rob got on the radar of Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and all the guys bringing the knives out, who they don't even have to say no. They just stand next to Vince, and Vince can say something like, so what do you think about this? And and that's all it takes. Not a no, but not a yes, and not a resounding yes is enough to make Vince, for some reason, change his mind or not commit fully to that. There's lots of incidents, and I'm naming names because it usually is Triple H as a talent and lumped right in there with Shawn Michaels. And I know Rob had some dealings with Shawn here and there, some personal stuff here and there with Shawn that's been squashed. And Rob has said that they get along fine. But yeah, There's guys that when you're as popular, as over, as talented, athletic, charismatic, and nobody ever saw anything like Rob Van Dam. What's wrestling? I'm gonna get my rug, you know what I mean? Over the top, loud. People picture Dick the Bruiser type promos, not Rob Van Dam. Hey, this is just me. I'm cool. That's it. Smiling, laid back. But in the ring, that laid back attitude just translates into intensity while still being Rob. They couldn't quite figure it out because he didn't fit in that pro wrestling mold. So it could have been a little bit of misunderstanding, but I believe it's more the political knives came out and started catching him in his back.
Paul Heyman, after Rob.
By the way, same thing with
I'm sorry.
Taz. I'm sorry to interrupt. Taz on his debut, how over was Taz?
Oh,
At
crazy.
the Garden against Kurt Angle. Okay. Now Taz could have stuck up for his business and rubbed people the wrong way. I don't have any information on that, but I can tell you right away, there's 2 or 3 guys at the top, and they might be the same names I talked about that said, nah, too short. Like, that's all you need to say to Vince. Too small, too short, and that plants the seed. And then they set Taz up to fail after that.
Paul Heyman, after Rob turns back up after serving his 30-day suspension, Paul Heyman tries to basically push Rob as the face of ECW. We're going to talk about Kurt Angle a little later. But essentially, even as a very young adult at that time, I remember thinking very clearly that it was just a fool's errand to push Rob, because I don't know if I was reading it at the time or it was just obvious that Rob was never going to be the champion again in WWE or ECW. So it just calls for it just made for a really anticlimactic story, whether he was working with Big Show or whoever else, that apparently Rob was just never going to be trusted again. For something that was, quite frankly, I mean, especially in 2025, a really minor infraction. Even in 2006, it just seemed like complete overkill to suspend him and strip him of the belts. I mean, what was the reaction, I guess? Because I asked you this off air, and you went, there wasn't a huge outcry when he was suspended.
No, I don't recall any kind of outcry publicly or to the office or anything like that. But I know amongst the ECW guys, or even me being a WWE guy that had been in ECW, they're looking at that like, they already looked at us kind of like, yeah, we're kind of not sure about this thing, even though, like I said, we had the promise in the beginning that it was going to stand on its own. We would have our own agents. Shane and Dreamer would be kind of running it. And then I guess final approval from Vince. Paul's involved majorly, I guess, as the booker of the whole thing. You know, we talked about that's why I never really got any kind of opportunities for past, conflict with Paul. But when we were looking at that, it was almost like, I guess you can't have an outcry because at this point, everybody's probably scared for their jobs. Most guys just got there and got hired for the new ECW. I'm already an old toy, so I'm like, eh. But amongst us, we're like, okay, well, they have every opportunity and they have every reason to bury everybody now, including ECW, because in their mind, hey, we give you a shot. Now you proved us right. And like you said, Rob and Sabu, for what they did, it didn't need to be. The punishment didn't fit the crime. Even back then, it's like, who didn't know that Rob had that hobby?
Mm.
Who didn't know?
But they
You know what
both
I mean?
had pills on them. That's the thing. But Sabu doesn't get suspended, but Rob
Well, I
does
don't even
because he
know.
had weed.
I assume Sabu was suspended too. That's really news to me because you would think logically looking back at it. Now you researched it. That is really like if Rob got suspended, which he did, and Sabu did not, man, they were singling out Rob. That's the only thing I would think.
I better be right on this, but I was looking at the dates and it seemed like that. I'll research that more as I ask you this next question. Rob then goes to be shunted down pretty much to the middle of the pack before leaving WWE in June of 2007 when his contract with WWE expired. Rob got more heat on himself prior to leaving, and around December to Dismember time, in fact, for not going on the, do you want to do the air quotes with me? Voluntary. Aha.
Ha
Tribute to the troop shows in Iraq. He said absolutely not. They couldn't force him. But guess what they also did was he basically was in the doghouse after that. Did you ever go to Iraq for the shows?
No, never went to it. Never went to any of the tribute for the troops overseas, and they did it. They've done that domestically well after I left the company. So, like I say, I left. They threw me out. Got rid of me. So, with Rob, now, like he told me this story, and he's told this story many, many times. And it might not have just been me; it might have been people in the locker room. But he became even more of a hero because I remember it was Johnny, I believe, it said, "Hey, it's just voluntary. You can go to Iraq. You don't have to do it." And he goes, "Okay, I don't want to go." "Well, I was just saying it's voluntary. I'm your pal." And he goes, "No, I'm not going to go, Johnny." So then I think Vince came into the picture, right? And he said, "Rob, it is voluntary to go to the tribute to the troops." He goes, "Cool. I don't want to go." He goes, "You don't understand. It's voluntary." He's like, "Cool, I'm not going." He said, if it didn't happen that way, I hope it did. I wish it did, but I do recall that something where Vince kept repeating, "It's voluntary," and getting angrier and angrier each time he tried to let Rob know it's voluntary. And Rob's right. Why would he want to leave at the time his wife, his home to do that?
I
It's
think
not
his
like a
wife might
battle
have been
royal
like
where
unwell
pride.
around the time.
It's
I'm
not
sorry
like
to
a,
interrupt.
yeah, go ahead.
Rob's wife, I think, might have been unwell at the time or something. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. But I mean, there's
Well,
more important things for him to be worrying about if that was the case.
unwell or well, I wouldn't want to leave my wife. It took me that long to find her. I don't want to leave her for anything. So yeah, and it was not a completely safe kind of proposition if you think about it. Lots of guys that were telling me they had to do that maneuver thing to kind of avoid any RPGs or anti-aircraft missiles or any. It was a pretty deep. They were going right into Iraq. I think the other one is Afghanistan, right?
Hmm.
So they were going right into the belly of the beast.
Yeah, I remember hearing a story quite a while ago where, like, one of the generals or whoever it was who was controlling or, in charge of one of the bases in one of those countries actually said, "What are you doing here? Nobody ever visits us here because it's so dangerous." But WWE was really going deep into the water.
First time ever. That's what Vince is big on. First time ever. Maybe last time ever. But yeah, Rob was a locker room hero, at least amongst us, for doing that and actually saying it. And the ridiculous gaslighting, which it wasn't even called gaslighting back then, but they were trying to push this propaganda that it's voluntary. And for him to do that, and they were probably pissed because it opens up other talent to say, you know, everybody wants to be first to be second. They see Rob doing it and they're like, I don't want to go either. And Vince was not very happy about that. You know what? I would rather, I'm sure Rob would say the same thing. So you're saying you're not petty, by the way. You're not petty at all, WWE. But if his wife is unwell, which we don't know, but even so, I do not want to leave my family. I do not want to go here. It's way too dangerous and it's not worth it. And have a general say, yeah, we don't want anybody here either. What if Rob heard him say that and he landed? He's like, oh my God, I should have trusted my instincts and stayed home with my wife. So good for him. I mean, oh, you're going to lose fake matches? Oh my God, what's at the end of the world? Because Rob Van Dam, he did it not long ago in AEW. Step right back in the ring and be just as over, if not more, than he was back then.
Yeah, he's not wrestled in about 11 months. Rob, don't yell at me if I get that wrong or got that wrong about you. I believe, and it's his first wife as well, not his current partner. Now, I'm also pleased to say that I was absolutely right. I'm pretty sure Sabu was not suspended, whereas Rob was. And during the time Rob was sat at home doing nothing, you wrestled Sabu twice, including at Saturday night's main event.
Yes. If you want a record-setting match, that was and I was traveling with Sabu during that time. I do have a Sabu story. I think I've told it on the WSI interview. But yeah, I wrestled Sabu. It was actually Saturday night's main event, and then the very next ECW TV taping, correct?
Yeah. So from Dallas and then Sci-Fi 6, Corpus Christi.
Yeah, he was definitely one of my favorite opponents in the ring, one of my favorite people to be around. Sabu, and this is Dreamer. This is everybody who's ever wrestled Sabu or been a part of ECW. Sabu should have made millions upon millions of dollars for what he did and how much of a pioneer and ahead of his time Sabu was. From Japan to ECW and everywhere else, Sabu really there wouldn't be the style, and people could probably say that's a good thing if there wasn't, but there wouldn't be that style of wrestling if it wasn't for somebody like Sabu. And you put Rob right in there, but Sabu was he preceded Rob, and his style and what he did had a whole different look and feel to it than a Rob Van Dam. That's why they
We,
teamed up. They were you figure they team up, they would be kinda like less than because these styles that are kinda similar, but they got even more over as a tag team.
so we're going to be talking about Sabu in a few minutes, actually. One more thing to add about Rob is basically, I think I said this before, but he left in June of 2007. His contract is expired. He just saw the writing on the wall and said, forget it. He did end up wrestling at the end of the year once for the WWE's 15th. Was it 15th? It couldn't have been 15th in 2006. Whatever, it was some like a Raw anniversary kind of thing, I guess.
Was it the number of episodes? I believe it was an episode anniversary.
Yeah, maybe it was, but I think it was at the end of the year, or the end of 2007, so it would have been, or maybe it would have been the beginning of 2008, and then it would have been 15 years. Yeah, that would have been it.
You know what's funny about that with Rob? Think about Rob. Like, he went through all that. They tried to make his life, just miserable as far as work environment and not getting the opportunities that a guy like that deserves. But he has to leave and come back as a part-time guy or a one-night type of special attraction, and they treat him better than when they had him under contract trying to make money with him. Isn't that weird?
He's a new toy again.
Yeah, he probably said, "I'm out of here after like when do I become an old toy? After like 4 weeks, or let me go 3 weeks to a pay-per-view and get the hell out of this place."